The next element is in verse 36 of 1 Samuel 17. And if you're counting, it's the 11th one, okay? Verse 36. This is David magnifying God's hand in his life. And remember this, God is honored when his servants remember his hand in their life. Did you catch that? God is honored when his servants remember his hand in their life. It gives you a whole new perspective of how to talk about life. Instead of, well, I did this and I did that and I'm going to do this. You can step back and say, I'm amazed to see how God, who fit me together in my mother's womb, has shaped me and formed me for a specific purpose, and it's been a lifelong joy to fulfill his purposes. And to know that in those climactic moments in life, I was where he wanted me to be. See, that's what David's doing. Look at verse 36. Your servant, he's being interviewed by the king, has killed both lion and bear. Now, if we stop there, it would sound like all of us. This is what I've done. But he doesn't stop there because he's a servant of the Lord. And this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. David attached everything to God. He attached even his killing the lion and the bear to this enemy of God. And if God allowed him, as you'll see in the rest of the verse, to kill the lion and the bear, it'll be a small thing to kill this giant. So he continues, and he says in verse 37, Moreover, David said, The Lord, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear. Now we're getting a second telling of the lion and bear story, and he is amplifying it, not to show how great a marksman he was, or how fearless he was, or how he took self-defense course and could even beat, predators out in the field alone as a young adolescent. No, the Lord, who delivered me, verse 37, from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear. He, see the emphasis, it's God is the emphasis of his story, it's not himself. God, not himself. Later in life, the 115th Psalm captures this. It says this, Not unto us, O Lord, not unto us, but unto your name be the glory. David had a habit of this, magnifying God's hand in his life. He, the middle of verse 37, God, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. And Saul said to David, Go, and the Lord be with you. What a great word from old Saul. By the way, we're going to look at Saul's life before this is all over and show you how not to serve God. King Saul, from this passage, is the primary example of how not to serve God. He was called and chosen and anointed and picked out and commissioned and spirit-empowered and everything else. He had the whole package. He just was sent off as the king with everything, with God's imprimatur. He even was, Saul I'm talking about, was even empowered by the Spirit and prophesied. Spirit of God was on him. But his life, his epitaph is, how not to serve God. We'll see that later. David's life, how to serve God. And Saul, in this moment, go and the Lord be with you. When David was asked to talk about himself by King Saul and explain the biggest qualifications he could think of for the job of facing Goliath, what does David say? He tells the king that his greatest accomplishments came from the hand of God. Do you see the hand of God in your life? Do you talk about the hand of God in your life? Do you know how to do that? Does it make you feel uncomfortable? If it makes you feel uncomfortable, it's kind of like, you can always tell people that haven't done something and they try and act like they have, and they take out that new camera and say, let me take a picture, and then they go, how do you turn this on? What button turns it on? They act like they knew about the camera because all of us act like we know what's going on. Do you have to ask other people how to talk about the hand of God in your life? Or are you practicing it? Do others hear you point out the hand of God at work in your life? Even before you even talk about it, are you seeing the hand of God at work in your life? Do you see life that way? Do you see life as God formed me and fashioned me in my mother's womb? And He put together all the unchangeable parts and called me for His glory to accomplish what only I can accomplish. David saw that. And David told others about what God was doing in his life. And we should too, because God is honored when His servants remember His hand in their lives. And God wanted to magnify His hand in David's life. In 2 Chronicles 16:9, for the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the earth, looking for one whose heart is toward God so that He can show Himself strong through them. God wants to magnify Himself through us. And all we have to do is tune in and say, I'm your servant. Look at verse 45, same passage, 1 Samuel 17. I want to show you the next element, the 12th element. David wanted to honor God's name. And God is glorified when we honor His name. God's name is very important. People think so much of their names, they put them in places. They make them in stone. The so-and-so building, the so-and-so park. We want to remember people. We put their name on it. God has a great name, the greatest name, and He's glorified when we honor it. Verse 45, and then David said to the Philistine, this is that climactic moment, one of the greatest moments in sacred history, David and Goliath. What an incredible moment this was, and we'll revisit it again later on when we talk about another element of David's life. But verse 45, then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword. And what a sword he had. There was none like it, the Bible says later. With a spear. What a spear. Did you know that spear was like a weaver's beam? That means it was about the length of a stud. A normal 2x4 stud, 8-foot normal length. It had, though, a 25-pound spearhead on it. Most of us would have difficulty, other than the he-men in the audience, holding a stud, a 2x4, 8-foot long. Hold it straight out in front of us like that. Attach 3 milk cartons full of milk to the end. That's 25 pounds. Can you imagine an 8-foot long spear that you hold in one hand and you wave around and you throw? Goliath was big. He was a big guy. No roids, the steroid enhancement. This guy was big with this spear. Keep reading. And a javelin. But I come to you. Now, if I was casting this and if it was a movie, this would be David's voice, because this is how I think he was. But I come to you in the name of the Lord. It's this little guy. That's why it made Goliath so angry. He said, am I a dead dog? What are you, a fly coming on my carcass? He's just really cursing and carrying on. I come to you, this little boy says, in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Verse 46, this day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you, and I will take your head from you. He certainly had planned this out, hadn't he? He wasn't going in unprepared. David knew what he was doing. I will take your head from you, and this day I will give the carcass of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth. Why? Because David wanted to honor God's name. Look at the ending. That all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. If you ever want to do a neat Bible study, look at when this little phrase occurs up in the Bible. It occurs at all the greatest climactic moments in Old Testament sacred history. We're talking about at the moment of the fire falling with Elijah. We're talking about at the moment of the great conquest. We're talking about at the key moments like this was, that all the earth may know. Why? Why, David? Well, our world has marginalized God. You know what that means? They just talk him right out of the situation. He's not a part of the equation anymore. The true and living God who created everything and upholds all things is slowly being erased from public life in our world. His truth is minimalized. His word is neglected. His people are ignored. And all that God asks of us is one thing. Will you please magnify me? Will you please bring up my name? Will you magnify and honor my name? Always reminds me, when I was a little boy, one of the great Bible teachers of the day, I think he's still around, but he was unbelievable in his prime. His name was the Walking Bible. What was his name? Jack Van Impe. He played the accordion. Jack Van Impe was an evangelist, just starting out when I was this little shaver. And he used to preach in Lansing, Michigan. And I remember him telling, he memorized the whole New Testament, all 7,900 verses. And he was getting on an elevator, I think it was in the Michigan National Bank Tower, the tallest building in the capital of Michigan. And he got in that elevator, and he was just, getting all positioned when the person behind him, smoking a cigar, when smoking was okay and everybody did it, and this guy was smoking in public, and he went, that blankety blank, and used the name of God and cursed God's name and stuffed the cigar back in his mouth. And Van Impe said he turned around in the elevator car and looked at him and looked right in his eye and said, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for whosoever shall do so. And he just quoted the whole law to this guy. And he said the guy went and took a big suck in and took it out and coughed a little bit. And it was strangely silent in the elevator car. Now, I'm not suggesting you smoke in elevators or, call down people in elevators. I'm saying Van Impe had, at that moment, the right motivation. Honoring the name of God in a world where he's minimalized, neglected, ignored, and uncared for. Maybe it's just simply when your gang is talking and all of a sudden the conversation gets in the wrong direction and God isn't honored, say, I'm sorry. I can't stay and listen to that. I am a servant of the Lord, and I will not dishonor the Lord who lives within me with that. That works. It worked when I went to high school. Hasle High School. I remember that in the football locker room, they'd start saying, oh, man. I'd say, I'm not going to stay for that one. They called me deacon. I went back for my 10th. I was in town for my 10th high school reunion. I saw one of the kids I went to school with. That was in 84. He said, hi, deacon. He said, you haven't changed much. You know what? Stand up for God, even if they make fun of you, and honor his name. David did. David wanted to honor God, and God is glorified when we honor his name.